You probably think dopamine is the pleasure chemical. You believe that when you get a new like on your phone, you get a hit of pure joy. That is the mainstream narrative you have been told. But it is completely wrong. Because if dopamine was actually about feeling deeply satisfied, you would happily put your phone down after checking it just once. So why are you still zombie scrolling 2 hours later? What is your brain actually doing to you right now? You wake up, your eyes are barely even open. And before you even make a conscious choice, your hand is already reaching for the nightstand. You unlock the screen. You open an app. You pull to refresh. Nothing exciting. So you immediately switch to another app. Refresh again. You tell yourself, just 5 minutes to wake up. But you know that is a lie. The moment that screen lights up, your sense of time completely dissolves. You have probably noticed that your attention span feels utterly fractured lately. You can barely sit through a movie without reaching into your pocket during a slow scene. Sometimes you even feel a phantom vibration against your leg. You pull your phone out, only to find a completely blank lock screen. Your brain is quite literally hallucinating signals because it is so desperate for a hit. Why does this feel so compulsive? Why the anxiety when your device is in the other room? This is not a lack of discipline. It is not just a bad habit you can life hack away. Your neurological circuitry has been entirely hijacked by an ancient survival mechanism, a mechanism that is now trapping you in a punishing loop of anticipation and disappointment. To understand why you cannot simply stop scrolling, we have to look at what this molecule actually does. This is the real science of dopamine explained. Dopamine is not the reward itself. It is the fierce anticipation of the reward. It is the raw neurochemical of desire, motivation, and relentless craving. Think of a primitive human foraging on the savannah. They spot a colorful, life-saving berry bush a mile away in the distance. The primary dopamine spike does not happen when they finally eat the berries. It happens the moment they see the bush. That spike violently narrows their visual field, shuts out all other distractions, and provides the physical energy required to walk across dangerous terrain. It is an evolutionary drive designed to make you pursue things that ensure your survival. But today, your brain cannot tell the difference between survival and a screen. For you, the berry bush is the vibration in your pocket. It is the red notification badge. The slight haptic feedback when you drag your thumb down. When you initiate that pull to refresh motion, a region deep in your brain called the ventral tegmental area violently fires up. It releases a massive surge of dopamine into your reward circuitry, screaming at your entire nervous system. Something incredibly important is about to happen. Pay absolute attention. But here is the truly insidious part. The variable reward schedule. If you got an amazing, life-changing notification every single time you checked, you would actually lose interest. The brain adapts quickly to predictable rewards. Instead, most of the time you check, you get absolutely nothing. Sometimes you get a boring email. And occasionally, purely at random, you hit the jackpot. A highly validating message, a viral post, or a sudden flood of likes. This extreme unpredictability sends your dopamine system into absolute overdrive. It is the exact same neurological hook that keeps a gambling addict pulling a slot machine lever. Your smartphone is a slot machine sitting in your pocket. Every single time you unlock it, you are pulling that lever, begging for a physiological payout. But we have to talk about what happens immediately after that massive dopamine spike. This is the dark side of the cycle that completely destroys your focus. Your brain constantly seeks homeostasis, a state of strict neurochemical balance. So, after a huge unnatural spike in dopamine, your brain forcefully compensates by dropping your baseline levels. It drops them significantly below normal. This post-spike crash is known in behavioral neuroscience as the dopamine deficit state. When your dopamine drops into this deficit, you experience it physically. You feel sudden, crushing boredom, a lingering anxiety, and a profound lack of motivation. And what is the easiest, quickest, most frictionless way your brain knows to escape that deeply uncomfortable feeling of neurochemical deficit? Pulling the lever again. Opening the app one more time. You are no longer scrolling because you are finding any real joy or entertainment. You are scrolling desperately to escape the psychological pain of the dopamine crash that your previous scroll just created. It is a perfect, closed loop. The very tool that promised you infinite connection and entertainment is artificially depressing your baseline mood, making you entirely dependent on it just to feel normal. Let's dive even deeper into the anatomy of this hijack. When the ventral tegmental area fires, it projects dopamine straight to the nucleus accumbens, your core reward center. At the exact same time, it sends strong signals to your prefrontal cortex. This is the logical, rational, long-term planning sector of your mind. The intense dopamine surge literally dials down the activity in your prefrontal cortex. It bypasses your rational mind entirely. Your prefrontal cortex might be weakly protesting, "We have a huge project due tomorrow," but the primitive reward circuit simply drowns it out with chemical noise. And you are not fighting this battle alone. You are fighting against entire armies of behavioral psychologists and engineers employed by massive tech conglomerates. They engineer every single color choice, every specific notification sound, and every micro animation in your apps specifically to maximize that ventral tegmental area firing rate. Have you ever noticed the slight agonizing delay when a highly visual app first loads? That is not always a network lag. In many cases, it is an intentional, baked-in friction designed to deliberately stretch out the window of anticipation, pushing your dopamine spike even higher before the reveal. And features like the infinite scroll, they brutally remove the natural stopping cues that would normally signal to your brain that a task is complete. Without an endpoint, the dopamine never naturally subsides. You are trapped in a state of perpetual seeking, burning through your brain's motivational reserves until you feel completely hollowed out. Furthermore, you are likely engaging in what neuroscientists call dopamine stacking. You are never just checking your phone anymore. You are intensely scrolling social media while simultaneously watching a high-definition streaming movie and while aggressively snacking on highly processed, hyper-palatable foods. You are layering massive, unnatural, artificial spikes on top of each other, creating an exponentially deeper and more painful deficit state when the stimuli finally stop. This chronic depletion closely mimics the clinical symptoms of mild depression. That persistent brain fog, the daily exhaustion, the feeling that everything is just boring, it is a neurological consequence. The first crucial idea you must internalize is that every high has a mandatory biological tax. You cannot experience a massive artificial dopamine spike without suffering a corresponding unavoidable neurochemical crash. When you severely lack the motivation to do difficult things like studying, working out, or deeply reading, it is not a flaw in your character. It is your brain suffering from a deficit caused by cheap stimulation. You have artificially raised the threshold for what feels rewarding. Normal, everyday life simply cannot compete with an algorithm designed by brilliant engineers to hack your evolutionary biology. The second key idea to remember is that boredom is not your enemy. Boredom is the necessary healing reset button for your neurochemistry. When you forcefully resist the urge to check your phone during a quiet moment, you allow your burned-out dopamine receptors to heal and upregulate. You are slowly, deliberately returning your baseline to normal. As a result, the friction of doing hard, meaningful work will begin to feel significantly less painful. Reclaiming your attention fundamentally requires you to get comfortable with the temporary, itchy discomfort of absolute understimulation. The final key idea is that relying on raw willpower is a losing game when fighting an ancient, hardwired survival circuit. You must change your environment. Since dopamine is exclusively triggered by anticipation and cues, you must aggressively eliminate those cues. Turn your screen grayscale to remove the color triggers. Disable all non-essential badges, pop-up banners, and alert sounds. Transform your phone back into a simple tool that you use with strict intention, rather than a master trigger that mindlessly uses you. If you are ready to stop letting an algorithm dictate your neurochemistry, subscribe to the channel right now to finally master the science of your own behavior.